People always ask me how the hell are washing machines connected to fentanyl? But here we are in 2025 where your laundry costs 12% more because someone in Washington thinks China will cry about it. Except, spoiler alert, they won't. You will, when you're dropping an extra grand this year on literally everything you buy. So here's what actually happened. Trump rolled into office in January promising to make other countries pay for our problems, starting with a modest 10% tariff on China and 25% on Canada and Mexico because apparently maple syrup and avocados are the real threat to national security. But by April 2nd, he'd gone full send with what he calls reciprocal tariffs, which is just a fancy way of saying if Germany charges us 20%, we'll charge them 20% back. Except that's not how any of this works, and I'll explain why in a second. The Penn Wharton budget model, which sounds like a place where trust fund kids learn to count their daddy's money but is actually pretty legit, says these tariffs will shrink our economy by 6% and cut wages by 5%, while the average middle-class family loses $22,000 over their lifetime. But wait, it gets worse, because that's the conservative estimate before they factored in the April announcements. By the time all the tariffs kicked in, including the 50% on steel and aluminum and the special screw-you rates for 57 specific countries, America's effective tariff rate jumped from 2.3% to 14.1%, which, if you're keeping score at home, is the largest tax increase since 1993, except Trump keeps calling it beautiful, because apparently words don't mean things anymore. Here's the thing about tariffs that nobody wants to admit. They're literally just a tax you pay at the border. And when I say you, I mean you, the person watching this, not some Chinese businessman crying into his dumplings. Because as the Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows, Chinese exporters only lowered their prices by 0.7% despite facing 30 percentage point higher duties, meaning 99.3% of the cost got passed straight to American companies and consumers. The washing machine story is my favorite example of this stupidity in action. Back in Trump's first term, he slapped tariffs on imported washers to help Whirlpool. And guess what happened? Washing machine prices jumped 34%, while overall inflation was only 21%. And here's the kicker. Dryer prices went up by the same amount even though they weren't even tariffed, because manufacturers sell them as sets and figured, hey, free money. The University of Chicago economists calculated that each new job created by these tariffs cost consumers $815,000 per year, which is like paying someone a Ferrari salary to screw in agitators. But sure, let's do that for the entire economy. What could go wrong? Goldman Sachs expects 70% of tariff costs to hit consumers directly, and we're already seeing it happen, with the budget lab at Yale calculating that the April 2nd tariffs alone raised consumer prices by 1.3%, which translates to $2,100 per household. But when you add up all the 2025 tariffs, we're looking at 2.3% higher prices and $3,800 per household. And before you think, well, at least my t-shirt will be safe, think again, because apparel prices are projected to rise 17%, while food prices jump 2.8%, which is basically an entire year's worth of normal grocery inflation happening all at once. Speaking of groceries, about 40% of supermarket products will see price increases, with coffee, chocolate, olive oil, and pretty much anything that makes life worth living getting hit with tariffs ranging from 10 to 46%, depending on which country we're mad at this week. Electronics are particularly screwed because China, Taiwan, and South Korea make most of our gadgets, and they're facing tariffs up to 34%, which means your next iPhone could cost an extra $200 just because Trump thinks Tim Cook needs to suffer. Although, let's be real, Cook will just pass that cost to you while posting record profits. Cars are even worse, with economists predicting price increases between $2,500 and $20,000 depending on the model, because, surprise, surprise, even American cars use parts from Mexico and Canada, and those 25% tariffs don't care about your F-150's feelings. But here's where it gets really funny, in a dark, watching the world burn kind of way. Trump keeps saying foreign countries pay the tariffs, which is like saying the grocery store pays your sales tax. It's either a fundamental misunderstanding of basic economics or a deliberate lie, and honestly, I can't tell which is worse. The White House literally put out a fact sheet claiming access to the American market is a privilege, and that tariffs will drive economic growth, which is like saying punching yourself in the face is good for your complexion. Multiple federal courts have already ruled that using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs is illegal, but Trump is appealing because apparently the emergency is that not enough Americans are poor yet. The legal circus is almost as entertaining as the economic one, with judges basically saying, dude, you can't just declare everything an emergency to bypass Congress. But the tariffs keep rolling while the appeals process grinds on, meaning we're all paying the stupid tax while lawyers argue about constitutional law. The The Federal Reserve is caught between a rock and a hard place because inflation was finally cooling down to 2.4%, but the OECD now predicts it'll spike to 3.9% by the end of 2025 thanks to these tariffs, which means interest rates stay high, mortgages stay expensive, and the housing market stays more locked up than a paranoid prepper's bunker. JP Morgan dropped their GDP growth forecast to 1.3%, which in Wall Street speak means things are about to get spicy, while warning that vehicle prices alone could jump 11.4% if automakers pass on the full costs. Meanwhile, the stock market keeps hitting records because nothing makes sense anymore, and apparently expensive washing machines are bullish. The really twisted part is that the washing machine tariffs did create some jobs when Samsung and LG built factories in Tennessee and South Carolina, but those jobs came at such an insane cost per position that we could have literally just handed each worker $800 a year to stay home and watch Netflix and saved money. This is what passes for economic policy now, making things more expensive so a handful of people can have jobs that cost society more than they produce. It's like hiring someone to dig holes and someone else to fill them, except the holes cost $1,000 each. Consumer confidence is already tanking, with retail sales falling for 2 months in a row as people realize their paychecks don't go as far. But don't worry, Peter Navarro says all the economists warning about this have been discredited because apparently math is now partisan. The administration's talking points are basically inflation isn't here yet, so we win, ignoring that businesses are still burning through pre-tariff inventory and the real price spikes are expected to hit this summer when companies have to restock at the new rates. Car dealers are still selling vehicles imported before the tariffs, which is why prices haven't exploded yet. But once that inventory runs out, buckle up, Buttercup, because that $25,000 Corolla is about to become a $30,000 Corolla. The bond market knows what's coming, which is why yields are creeping up despite the Fed trying to keep things calm, because when you massively increase import costs while cutting domestic production through deportations, you get stagflation, that beautiful 1970s economic disaster where everything costs more but nobody has jobs. Canada and Mexico are threatening retaliation, the EU is planning counter tariffs, and China's already hitting our agricultural exports because trade wars are like regular wars, except everyone loses and soybeans are the casualties. Farmers who voted for this are about to discover that making China pay actually means their crops rot in silos while Trump declares victory on Truth Social. But wait, there's more, because apparently regular tariffs weren't stupid enough, so now we have national security tariffs on cars, fentanyl emergency tariffs on neighbors, and reciprocal tariffs on anyone who looks at us funny, with rates changing so fast that businesses can't even plan inventory without consulting a fortune teller. One day it's 10% on China, the next it's 20%. Then Trump tweets about copper at 3 a.m. and suddenly that's tariff too, creating what economists call radical uncertainty, which is a polite way of saying nobody knows what the hell is going on. The administration's latest genius move is sending form letters to world leaders with specific tariff threats, basically conducting trade policy via Mad Libs where you fill in the country name and pick a random percentage. This isn't negotiation, it's economic performance art, where the audience pays the ticket price through higher costs on literally everything. The Tax Foundation, which despite its boring name actually knows math, calculated these tariffs amount to an average tax increase of nearly $1,200 per household in 2025, rising to over $1,400 in 2026. But hey, at least we're sticking it to those foreign companies who are definitely feeling the pain while swimming in their pools of money like Scrooge McDuck. The cognitive dissonance required to simultaneously believe that tariffs punish foreign countries while celebrating American manufacturing wins is Olympic-level mental gymnastics, but here we are watching politicians pretend that making everything more expensive is somehow good for poor people. The Boston Fed's analysis shows core inflation could jump anywhere from 0.5% to 2.2% just from tariffs, and that's assuming no retaliation, no supply chain disruptions, no currency effects, which is like assuming your ex will be reasonable during the divorce. In reality, when you factor in retaliation, weaker dollars, and companies padding their margins because, hey, if prices are going up anyway, might as well get yours, we're looking at inflation that makes 2022 look like a practice round. The smart money is already moving, with hedge funds betting against retail stocks and going long on companies that benefit from protectionism, because when life gives you economic nationalism, you make lemonade from other people's tears. The import-dependent businesses are scrambling to find domestic suppliers who don't exist or cost 3 times as much, leading to quality drops and shrinkflation, where your 15-ounce can of tomatoes mysteriously becomes 12 ounces but costs the same. The supply chain whiplash is giving corporate executives nightmares as they try to source components from approved countries, only to have the tariff rates change mid-shipment. It's like playing 3-dimensional chess, except the board is on fire and the pieces randomly explode. But don't worry, I'm sure this will all make America great again, just like how hitting yourself with a hammer makes you stronger. Technically true if you survive, but probably not the best strategy. The house always wins, but at least now you know the game. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.